Good evening. You're live with Kevin and Leo,
Yeah.
Indian Times.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
So today we have a lot of news, and some of it deals with stuff you've already been hearing about, and that's Trump. But then we have other stuff as well. We just usually talk about stuff that's dealing with native country. So, and how some of this news that is national news actually does affect native country as well.
Absolutely.
What do you got going on?
Well, there's a lot going on. There's always a lot going on. It seems like these days. This week, the Trump administration decided to cast blame on Indian country for delaying a much anticipated study of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers originally planned to issue a new analysis on or before April 2nd of the pipeline. The study was ordered after a federal judge said the first decision, made less than 3 weeks after President Donald Trump took office, was flawed and failed to take tribal concerns into account. Government attorneys now acknowledge the study won't be completed by the April 2nd deadline. Now they're blaming the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, the Oglala Sioux Tribe, and the Yankton Sioux Tribe for failing to submit documents for sort of the tribal review for this pipeline study within an appropriate amount of time, I guess. The tribes, on the other hand, are saying that the federal government has failed to consult with the tribes regarding this pipeline study, and have sort of abrogated their government-to-government relationship by failing to consult with tribes on this study. So certainly, I think there's some back and forth if you agree with what the government's saying, which I assume most people listening to this probably don't.
So what's the point, though? I mean,
Yeah.
what's the point of blaming Standing Rock or the people that were resisting this pipeline for this environmental study? Like, what do they plan on getting out of that? Do they think that they're going to be able to just say, okay, well, it's their fault, so we're just going to let them operate as usual? Because they're actually pumping oil through it right now.
Yeah, it's been up and running.
Because what are the repercussions of not having that environmental impact? Is it that they're supposed to shut down until it's done?
No, it won't be anything like that.
Fines?
No,
Nothing? They
Yeah.
just want to blame us so
Yeah.
that they don't have to actually.
I mean, they have to do this environmental study in order to, continue pumping, in order to continue development of this pipeline.
Technically,
Yeah, technically.
but not with Trump.
Yeah, if this study isn't completed, I mean, that could, under a certain administration, spell an end to the project. Under this administration, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
But they decided to play the blame game. They decided to, cast aspersion on Indian country and say that, Indian country is the cause of the fact that this study isn't being completed.
I mean, we
Yeah.
might be the cause of a lot of things in the world.
Yeah. A lot of good
If you wanted
things.
to, if you wanted a scapegoat,
Yeah.
yeah, blame the Indians.
Yep.
Blame Indians.
Mm-hmm.
Blame Canada. Did you ever hear that? Blame Canada. That was on a
No?
cartoon, an adult cartoon. I can't think of what it's called right now.
Mhm.
South Park.
Sure.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
one of their little
Oh,
catchy
hey, I like
songs.
this. Somebody,
What?
I don't know how to pronounce that name.
Hey Leo, can you guys change the name to Native or Indigenous Talk? Huh, that's a good
I like
that's
that.
a good idea.
Thank you.
Well, okay, so Indian Times came before because your news station, your online news station, started out, and then they recruited him, and then we wanted to kind of go along that same line. So it's kind of grandfather claused in, and then we actually used the word too, because I say native as well, so I know that a lot of people would prefer the word native.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Indian Times is a reference to Indian time,
Mhm.
which is a phrase that is used to describe the fact that Indians are always late.
Yeah, and we're actually giving the news and our opinion about the news after it's
Yeah.
happened.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of little
Yeah. I mean, that's a play on words. I mean, it's
caveats,
not necessarily meant to, use the word Indian.
be as
in a way.
politically correct as
Yeah.
We probably should be.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Yeah.
a bunch of schmoes basically just talking about crap we don't know anything about. So
You
Indian,
can call us
Indian
that though if you
Times
want.
seemed
Yeah,
appropriate.
you can tell people that's what we're
Whereas
called.
Indigenous talk sounds very professional and
Yeah.
it's like a bar too high.
Right. We're setting the bar low. so we don't disappoint anybody. We're gonna set the bar really low right now. So
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah. Appreciate the idea.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
that's very good. We thank you for that.
Yeah.
And we thank everybody who's tuning in, and any feedback we do get, it's
Mhm.
cool.
Absolutely.
It's a dad joke. I don't know what that means, but all right, yeah. I like this live because then
Yeah.
you get people giving you some feedback and laughing at things you're saying, and
Yeah.
so it's all
Mhm.
good.
I like that.
Yeah, and maybe they should name the Dakota Access Pipeline the Donald Trump Pipeline.
Hmm.
Because they tried to name a highway, like a 600-mile stretch of highway in Utah, Donald Trump Highway.
Oh, yeah.
And they got some backlash from the tribes. They got some backlash from the other senators and the other congressmen. And so they actually dropped the bill to name this highway Donald Trump Highway.
Mhm.
But one of the guys, let me see, what was his name again? Senator Jim DeBacchus. He actually was going to fight this by introducing a part to the bill to name the highway the Donald Trump Highway, and also the Stormy Daniels Ramway. So once he brought that up, and they started to giving him all this backlash. The guy's name was where? I thought I wrote his name down here somewhere. Mike E. Noel.
Mhm.
E's his middle initial, not Mikey is his name. So Mike Noel. He's a representative that brought this bill because he's so grateful that Donald Trump opened up Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante, that he wanted to name this highway after him because he's probably making some money off of the corporations that are going to be extracting the oil and coal out of this area that they reduced the Bears Ears for, because they said that didn't have anything to do with it. They said that there was nothing to do with any kind of energy extraction out of this area. They wanted Donald
Nothing to
Trump
do with
wanted,
oil, nothing to do with coal, nothing to do with any of that.
he wanted to do this for the people and for the tribes,
For the
to
tribes,
get the land back.
yeah, to give us greater control over our resources and our sacred sites.
Yeah, and then we find out that he was being lobbied to open this up by actual oil companies and coal companies. So you know how that goes.
Shocking.
More
shocking news.
But they're not going to name this highway, the 600-mile stretch of highway, after Donald Trump because of the fact that they got so much backlash over even introducing this bill in the first place.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump has also been in the news just today, or was it yesterday, for congratulating Russia.
I don't know about that.
Oh, you didn't hear that?
I didn't hear that.
So
No,
okay. So Putin had another election, right? But nobody else actually qualified to run against him.
Yeah,
so
and they have video of ballots being stuffed and the
Right. So he won, and he's having issues with Britain and UK over this man and his daughter being these Russians that were considered spies for Britain, that actually moved to Britain, being poisoned with some kind of nerve agent that only Russia has. So they condemned him for that, but Donald Trump yesterday actually congratulated him for winning his election, and then didn't even mention anything about what was going on with our allies, like United States and Britain or UK are allies. And so it's funny, it's ridiculous, but eventually, hopefully, he'll be out of there and we can get some of this stuff corrected before we completely ruin and toxify the entire planet.
Yeah.
We're going that way, though.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely. They're going to blame us. They're going to blame the natives somehow. And I don't know if you noticed, but I said natives, not Indians. So hopefully that made you happy. Whoever wanted us to change our name.
Yeah.
What else you got going on?
Well, Congress is currently considering reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. And this is an act that was passed many years ago, but was reauthorized back in 2013. When it was reauthorized in 2013, Congress decided to include some provisions that gave tribes greater authority to prosecute non-Indians who commit crimes on reservations. And this is very important because back in 1978, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling that basically said that tribes have no ability to prosecute non-Indians who commit crimes on their lands. So between 1978 and 2013, when this bill was reauthorized, tribes totally lacked any authority to do anything about non-Indians who commit crimes on the reservation. And that created all kinds of problems, of course. I mean, you had, especially domestic violence, you had non-Indian husbands who were beating their wives, and tribal police couldn't do anything about it. All they could do is hand it over to the feds, and if the feds decided to decline the case, which they often did, especially in domestic violence cases, because it didn't meet their threshold for investigation. And oftentimes the feds were very skeptical of tribal police and their investigative capabilities, so they wouldn't prosecute or attempt to prosecute these cases. So this was a big problem. I mean, you had non-Indians basically oftentimes moving to the reservation, marrying Indian women, and knowingly or understanding that they were essentially immune from prosecution for anything they might do on the reservation. So anyway, in 2013, Congress decided to change this. They decided to give tribes a limited amount of authority over non-Indians who commit crimes on reservations. And what they said is that tribes can prosecute non-Indians who commit domestic violence or dating violence against tribal members, against Indians. And so, I mean, a little bit of authority at least. It gave tribes a little bit of power, to certainly at least fight domestic violence and dating violence. And since 2013, that's what's been happening. There have been about 18 tribes that have actually used these new provisions to prosecute non-Indians who commit crimes. Since 2013, those 18 tribes have arrested 128 different non-Indian perpetrators of domestic and dating violence for 143 different crimes. Those arrests have led to 74 convictions and 5 acquittals. So this is all good. I mean, certainly this is great, and Congress is considering reauthorizing, and there is actually some legislation in place right now, some proposals in place to even expand tribal authority over non-Indians even more, so that they can, fight non-Indians who sell drugs on the reservation, or who commit violence against children, or those kinds of things. So greater authority, basically, to fight these kinds of things, instead of having to always, try to rely on federal agents who oftentimes decide they don't want to take these cases. So.
Yeah, right now we have a lot of issue with Mexican Mafia and Sir 13, a couple of gangs that bring up a lot of drugs into the reservation, and then actually kidnap women and beat up people and shoot people, kill people. And so, yeah, they got to transfer that over to the FBI. But, some of those people actually set up shop and live on the reservation as well. And then you got to deal with that legally. And it's just ridiculous that for so long we have been oppressed to the point where we don't have any control over our own society, like that. And then we got to deal with our own government, with our own tribal government, and the issues with, division, even with this being removed from helping natives that have moved off the reservation, or considering them still having a valid vote or having any kind of real value to the tribe itself, because they're gone off the reservation. But we're all connected, and we have to stay connected in order for us to become strong and successful again. One thing that I plan on doing, I'm gonna tell you guys right now. I'm gonna tell you guys before I actually even get it started what I plan on doing. So I plan on starting up a debate, a national debate, a native national debate with youth, and have it to where the debate is about how does a native become a governor of a state? How does a native become a congressman? How does a native become president? Okay, what are some of the steps you have to take to be able to do this in your life, and have that be a debate that they actually win scholarships, and they win things that they can use to actually better their lives, instead of just maybe some cool Xbox or something like that, where they actually get a good computer or different things to make it to where they can become successful and not just use something that's going to deteriorate and go away. But we need our own people to start voting. We need our own people to get involved in the legal system in order to make changes. We got natives out here who are doing things, and they're doing great things, and they're working towards sovereignty, and they're talking to the tribes about becoming sovereign, using that sovereignty that we have. And that is great. And I believe that they are very necessary, and I believe that is a goal that we should be striving towards. But also, we need people that are in the system making changes in the system, because things like these laws that makes it so that we don't have legal control over non-natives that are living on the reservation, to me, that's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse my French or my language or whatever you want to say, but that's garbage.
I mean, so many of these issues
garbage
that we talk about here, and that any country, considers all the time, just always go back to sovereignty. We're trying to establish ourselves or reestablish ourselves as truly sovereign nations, and a sovereign nation has the ability to prosecute people who commit crimes on their land. And this idea that tribes shouldn't have that ability, I mean, is a result of such deep-rooted racism, I think. And there have been congressional leaders who, in arguing against these various bills that provide greater authority to tribes to prosecute non-Indians, have said that. They said, we're really concerned about tribes being able to prosecute non-Indians and not having the same protections in place, due process and impartial juries, rehabilitation, I guess, for offenders who commit certain kinds of crimes, adequate incarceration facilities, things like that. So these are all things that tribes have had to, in order to even participate in these laws, in order to be able to prosecute non-Indians, they've had to, contract with BIA jails and that sort of thing to house offenders, non-Indian offenders. They've had to start rehabilitation programs for especially batterers, domestic batterers and that sort of thing. So it's difficult. I mean, we always have to prove ourselves. We always have to prove we're worthy of these things. And people think we're still living in teepees and that, we're gonna take these non-Indian offenders who commit crimes on our reservations and bury them in the sand up to their neck or something and let ants crawl over their face or something, and there really are people who think that way. I mean, they see this crap on TV and in the movies and they think that's how we live and that's what our justice system is like, when in fact, I mean, if you go to most reservations nowadays, you'll find some very modern, jails, rehabilitative programs. Native people study these things just like everybody else, and we have educated people who go off and learn about these things and bring those ideas back, and we totally have the ability to impartially prosecute people and provide them rehabilitation, once that prosecution is ended. So I do think there's a great amount of racism and ignorance, I think, that exists out there about Native American judicial practices.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, the system's set up really to suppress us. I mean, to a point where it's really ridiculous, some of the things that are going on. Like, for instance, if you're on a reservation and you can commit a felony, and if it's even something that's a nonviolent felony, you're going to go to federal prison, right? And federal prison holds organized criminals. I mean, it holds like some of the most sophisticated criminals you can think of are in federal prison. So you put some natives in there that are not really sophisticated criminals. Basically, they're just living on the reservation, struggling, having a dysfunctional lifestyle, and they get caught up in petty crimes to the point that they get a felony, and they end up in these prisons, and they actually learn. Instead of learning rehabilitation, learning how to have a better lifestyle, they get these big number prison sentences, and then they learn basically how to become more criminal minded instead of actually rehabilitating. Like, I believe that we should, and I've told people this before, and I've gotten some backlash for it, but I believe we should have our own prisons. We should actually have maybe one or two central prisons. And we should make those prisons.
When you say we, are you talking about one specific tribe or like all tribes?
Intertribal.
I like that.
And have the prison to where it's a rehabilitation prison where you're like up in a tech school. Mm-hmm. And if you want the privileges that the general population of the prison have, you have to actually be taking classes or learning on the job training in this prison, and then you get these benefits. I was looking at some of the prisons in Europe. Mm-hmm. Some of the prisons in Europe look like little studio apartments, and these guys are not what's it called, recidivism?
Yeah, Yeah,
they're not
not repeat
repeating,
offenders.
repeat
Yeah.
offenders, and I think
Hmm.
that's something that we could do for our population and actually bring them back into the reservation with actually some skills to bring industry in, because that's one thing that we really need for that, for our sovereignty. We need industry.
Yeah.
That's super important, and we can make it ourselves,
Hmm.
and with the web and with shipping, I mean, we could do anything we want, really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It doesn't just have to be casinos and
Hmm.
tobacco
Yeah.
and hemp.
No, that's a great point. It's a lot of prisons nowadays are incorporating a lot of educational programming. You can learn cooking classes. You can get your certain kind of certificates, such as to cook food, or
Yeah.
you can get a
Personal
degree.
trainer, yeah.
All these things. It's got nothing but time on your hands. I mean, that's a great time to do those kinds of things. So
Yeah, and learn some social skills and
yeah.
some ethics too.
Hmm.
Do some couples counseling and relationship counseling, so you can actually maybe have a conjugal visit, stuff like that. I'm down for that.
Okay.
You know what I mean, though?
I think.
Wouldn't that be very motivating for someone who
Yeah.
isn't as motivated to change themselves, because it's scary. It's
Yeah.
hard to change.
Hmm.
If you could actually go through this relationship counseling in order to be able to have a conjugal visit, even though you're locked up. I mean, they do it other places.
Yeah, cool.
Why can't
So
we
you
do
were
it?
making a mature point. I was having a very immature response.
Right. You're like,
Is what happened there.
they're gonna have conjugal visits. What are they gonna do in there?
All right, my bad.
That's funny.
I will swallow that pill.
That's horrible.
It's not horrible. Come on now. That's
horrible.
extreme.
No, it's not horrible. You're fine. I was thinking the same thing.
Or, as you said it.
Yeah. I just don't want to laugh because I'm trying to be professional.
Yeah.
I got this first time I went live on my feed before. We've already went live. We got 2 feeds going right now.
I just got to say, Chong. That's to my friend
Chong.
Craig Henry. How's it going,
Henry.
Craig? Good to hear you. Good to see you.
Yeah. And thank you all for tuning in. I've seen a lot of people actually pop up on my feed, on both of our feeds, really.
Yeah.
And we're also on YouTube, and we're also on SoundCloud. So maybe we can attach links to it later.
Yeah.
Once we load it up. Yeah. So.
We'll do. Yeah.
What
One more thing I wanted to mention, though, on that topic. He talked a little bit about the Mexican mafia and kind of that issue. I thought that was important to kind of mention too, because one of the tribes that took part in implementing this Violence Against Women Act was the Pascua Yaqui, and my apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, the Pascua Yaqui tribe of Arizona. And they're about an hour north of the Mexican border in Arizona. And they've been struggling a lot with how to deal with non-U.S. citizens who commit crimes on the reservation. And so that's another thing that has been sort of coming up as well. Do tribes have authority to prosecute non-U.S. citizens who commit crimes on the reservation? That brings up the whole issue of immigration and customs enforcement, and do tribes have the capacity to deal with those kinds of issues the way that the federal government does, or should those types of offenders be passed along basically to the federal system instead to be adjudicated? Now, whether they'll be adjudicated, I'm always skeptical of that. It seems like the federal government, their threshold is pretty high for prosecuting Indian crimes and reservations. They want to deal with things like murder, like drug trafficking, and that sort of thing. They don't really care so much about domestic violence and dating violence. So I'm skeptical of that. I think tribes, for that reason, if only for that reason, should have the ability to prosecute non-U.S. citizens who commit crimes on their lands.
Yeah. Hey, Alan, how you doing? But I think for us to do that, we need prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And a lot of people, when you think about prisons, you think about and they'll be for profit. They're all for profit, really, because you're going to get money from the government for it anyway. But you can build industry around it, and then you can actually teach people how to rehabilitate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people will want to come to a native prison, really, because it's crazy. Because if you're locked up, I'm saying, if like you catch somebody committing a crime on the reservation and they end up going into the prison system, it reminds me of like stories from back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
when we would take in captives, and then we would actually sell them back to their ransom them back to their opposing group, whoever we took the people from. And the people would always go and say, yeah, they treated us with dignity, and their way of life is very spiritual. And
we kind of adopted a lot of the hostages essentially that we took, and made them as much a part of our tribes as everyone else.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of people. Okay, so the natives out here that are watching, okay, a lot of natives have been real critical of non-natives who are trying to emulate the culture or trying to become part of the spirituality. And the way I look at it is, okay, everybody's indigenous to the planet Earth, right? And the major religion that that dominates this country in this area right now is Christianity. But a lot of the major Christian organizations have become consumerists. And so Christianity has become, and this isn't for everybody, but for a lot of people, Christianity has become more of a consumer religion than the actual religion. Like if you look at the politicians who are basically saying that they're evangelist Christians, but yet they're doing all this corrupt stuff in the background. It's all about being spiritual. Whatever religion you are, if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're Lakota, if you're any kind of tribal religion, it's about spirituality more than it is about the religious rules or the organization itself. And I see that people that are trying to cling to these spiritualities and they're trying to combine these spiritualities, they're basically looking for some kind of belonging that feels natural and that feels safe, because the leaders nowadays that we have in our society, like Donald Trump, is not a real Christian. He's not a real spiritual person. He's basically a consumerist, and that's what he's doing is he's trying to consume, and he's trying to make a profit off of the government and off of saying he's a Christian, and it's causing a lot of problems. And I think that that's why people are trying to emulate, and you hear people you get a lot of backlash for those kind of people, and they call it cultural appropriation, but they're just trying to find themselves,
Mm-hmm.
And it does help a lot of people though. Like my mom was a horrible alcoholic, and she found Christianity, and she got sober, and she's been living sober ever since. I practice traditional Lakota ways, but I was raised by my grandmother, not my mother. So it's all complicated. But to me, it looks like there's a large trend of people trying to go to find a natural spirituality that's not basically corrupted by consumerists. And it's hard because the leaders nowadays are basically, a lot of them are using this as a way of power instead of actually trying to just be spiritual, good people.
Yeah, but fortunately, we have that in Indian country too.
Yeah, we do. I tell that to people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I say, don't just trust somebody because they're native and
Yeah.
think that they're going to be all wise and give you an Indian name and give you tell you what your animal spirit is and all that good stuff, because you're probably going to get taken for a ride on that spirit horse.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's but I agree. I mean, absolutely, people are looking for some non-consumerist way of life, and to some extent, native spirituality can offer that. Yeah, I mean, but
that's complicated too.
Yeah,
though.
it's complicated. It's
because there's a lot of dysfunction in native country.
Yeah,
a lot of dysfunction in native country, and we're trying to heal from it.
Yeah,
Standing Rock's got a lot of people making efforts to heal.
Mm-hmm.
Seventh generation is right now, and people are trying to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And this next generation coming up is, we have a lot of hope and a lot of just faith in changes coming. Even though we got, the leaders trying to burn us down around us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, this week there's been some more Sherman Alexie fallout. I realize this is a little bit old topic, you
No,
know.
I mean it's just sad
It's
though. It's
yeah,
sad.
it's but I thought it was worth mentioning. For those of you who don't know, within the last couple months, a lot of allegations have been raised against prominent author Sherman Alexie. He's the author of books such as The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven, Reservation Blues. He's of Spokane, Coeur d'Alene descent, and has won a lot of awards over the years, including the National Book Award. But another award he won back in 2000 and I believe it was 14. Oh no, sorry, 2008 was the Best Young Adult Book Award from an organization known as the American Indian Library Association. This is an organization that helps kind of decide, you know, or give awards to various Native authors in order to try to let people know who they should read, basically. So this organization this week decided to rescind this 2008 award that it gave to Sherman Alexie because of these allegations of sexual harassment that have been targeted at him. And for his part, you know, Sherman Alexie has even admitted to some extent that he's treated women badly and people badly, and has apologized for that. But you know, has never really gone into any detail about what he's done. Or now, about 3 weeks ago now, the National Public Radio presented a report that quoted 3 women who presented some public allegations against Sherman Alexie that were to some extent pretty shocking. And so anyway, in rescinding this award today, or yesterday, I guess it was, this American Indian Library Association, the president said, "We believe that writers are members of our communities who we can look to as role models for our youth. We cannot therefore recommend Mr. Alexie's books." This association, however, did provide an alternative for people to read. They suggested that people read an anthology of poems, essays, interviews, and art by Native and First Nations women called Not Your Princess, Voices of Native American Women.
That's cool.
And this is an anthology that was published very recently and won the association's 2018 Best Young Adult Book. So I like that. I like that they're giving people an alternative, not just saying, you know, don't read Sherman's books, or, you know, we're going to take this award away from him, and you know, and suggest people not read him anymore. But here, look at this. I mean, here we've got some really great work here by these authors, and they're women on top of that. And let's take a look at their work. I mean, that was one of the more serious. Well, I mean, not more serious, but another serious series of allegations that have been leveled against Sherman is that he's been a gatekeeper, that he's been keeping other Native authors down and not helping other Native authors to climb up the ladder. That he's been threatening a lot of these women who have, you know, now come forward, you know, alleging these sexual harassment, making these sexual harassment claims. He was threatening them that if they came forward, he would ruin their careers. But even more than that, I mean, he's often been, you know, very, very critical of other Native authors, rather than, you know, trying to lift people up. And the few that Native authors who he has lifted up, it seems like has been kind of a tit for tat thing. That's a terrible word, by the way, since I just realized, considering that you know, basically he was offering commendation to these Native authors if they basically slept with him oftentimes. So anyway,
is that male authors too?
I don't think so. No,
Okay.
that hasn't been.
Good.
Nobody's claimed that yet.
Because I have a couple of rough drafts I'm working on.
Yeah.
So I definitely wouldn't want him trying to seduce me.
Yeah.
So that I could actually, you know, make it up the ladder.
You would want that?
No, I don't want that.
Oh, you don't want
No.
that? Okay.
I heard he was. Well, no, I think you told me this, that you heard he was a jerk too. Like he was rude to his fans and the people that he works with.
I mean, that's, you know, I don't see that as necessarily damning.
Why?
But
I mean,
well,
if you get power and you get fame, that
Okay.
don't mean that you could step on people or treat people like they're less than you.
Oh, I agree with that.
That's a character flaw.
Yeah, it's definitely a character flaw, but there are a lot of flawed artists, I mean, think about people like Van Gogh and Hemingway and a lot of these artists who were just terrible people.
Mm.
And maybe the things they did in their life are reason enough for us not to read them or look at their art today. Um, I won't necessarily contest that, but I think it's indisputable that their artwork, their novels or their stories have endured and have been considered now sort of the epitome of Western culture and civilization. And so, I mean, I think it does bring up this issue of, can you separate the artist from the art? And I know I take probably a little bit of a controversial stance here, but I would say you can. But you have to talk about, these character flaws whenever you
Right.
discuss this person's art.
Right. You just have to acknowledge that. Yeah,
Yeah.
this guy created some great books, but
hmm
he's a jerk and he's a sexual predator.
Yeah.
So
But at the same time, I would say,
alleged,
I
right?
mean,
Alleged. He hasn't. Well, I guess
well,
he
he's
did
admitted,
admit
so
to it.
it's
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
I don't know that it's necessarily alleged anymore, but what is alleged is this, how extreme, what he did was. So
Right, right.
that's alleged.
Just
but
harassing,
but
sexually
he's certainly
harassing him a little
admitted
bit.
that he's treated women badly, and that some of these accounts that have come forward were accurate.
Yeah.
He didn't say specifically what, but no, if a lot of teachers, because he's such a kind of the native author
Yeah.
and has been for a very long time.
He's been a role model. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
He's taught in classrooms. I actually have a sister-in-law who teaches his work up in Sioux City, Iowa, and she had actually come to me asking, what native author, and this was years ago, but what native author should I teach my teenage students? And she teaches, I believe, ninth grade. What Native American author should I teach to them? And I suggested Sherman Alexie because I thought I like some of his work. I've never been probably as much a fan as some people, but he's a great writer. Certainly, I don't necessarily. I haven't always appreciated his depictions of Indian country. I think
yeah.
oftentimes he's been very, very hard on his native characters, and by comparison, very easy on his non-native characters, and that always sort of indicated to me that maybe he has a very large chip on his shoulder against his own people. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, if I'm going to put that
Yeah.
out there, but
He could have self-esteem
yeah.
issues too,
Yeah.
because I mean, he's a native.
hmm
If you're not glorifying your own, then there's probably something going on within yourself.
Yeah. hmm
Mm.
So I was glad to see that this American Indian Library Association decided to rescind this award. I did actually, in reporting this story, did send a question on to the National Book Foundation to see whether they've considered rescinding the National Book Award that they gave to him. But I didn't hear back from them, so I don't know that that's going to happen. But I don't know that the foundation really rescinds awards ever. And like I said, I mean, that might be a philosophical sort of thing. Can you separate the art from the artist? So anyway, I mean, it's just another sort of
Yeah. How do you say? Is it Weinstein or Weinstein? Weinstein. Okay.
That's how I've heard it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he's been involved in some really great movies,
Yeah.
but they actually took him. They removed him from Wind River.
Yes.
Because Wind River, if you haven't seen Wind River, you need to go watch Wind River.
And it's on Netflix now.
It's Netflix. It's on Netflix now, and you can get it at Redbox, and you can get it at Instaflix. But Wind River shows about the sexual assault, the kidnapping, the rape, the murder of indigenous women related to the man camps. The man camps are popping up all around the reservations as they're doing this extreme energy extraction. And, these men, a lot of them are trained. Some of them are trained military. Some of them are just have a lot of money and can get themselves guns and can get weapons and can get, and they actually, just like he was saying earlier, the reservations have a hard time prosecuting these people, and they can go and they can prey on natives because a lot of natives are dealing with substance abuse, and these guys come in with these big wads of money, and they can buy drugs, they can get all the alcohol they want, and then they kidnap women and they hurt them, and they keep them for sex trafficking, and then they dispose of them by killing them, or they take him out of the country. And so Harvey Weinstein, of course, is a sexual predator who's been a sexual predator to some really big name movie stars. And so that actually had a really big ripple effect on exposing a lot of other sexual predators. But, Wind River, he was part of that, and they took him completely, his company completely off of the movie rights, and so that I think was a really good thing that happened. It was really bad about dealing with Sherman Alexie, because he has been a role model for our people for a long time, and so having not very many of them to deal with in the first place makes it to where losing him becomes just sad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what else you got going on in native country?
This week that's about it, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I want to talk about something that I notice in the country a lot, and people don't really want to talk about it as much. But okay, so the mainstream gets guided really easily by media and by the government, and so there was this bomber in Texas, and he actually his last bomb killed him as well. And they're not calling him a terrorist, even though his last bomb was a suicide bombing. And they're not calling him a terrorist because he was a white male that was 24 years old. Yeah. And so a lot of people think that you're actually being racist or you're being anti-white by bringing this kind of thing up, or bringing even up like bias in the police force. There was another young guy who was killed in his backyard in California.
Well, weren't a lot of the bombing suspects victims kind of prominent black people?
They're minorities, yeah.
So, I mean, if this had been reversed and it was, a black bomber who was bombing prominent white citizens, I can't imagine that the authorities would say that person wasn't a terrorist.
Or a Muslim.
Or a Muslim just targeting anybody,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was just absolutely ridiculous to me that we call that person. We don't call that person a terrorist, and we want to label them as a lone wolf or mentally ill. Yeah.
So I mean, basically every terrorist is mentally ill.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't be doing it in the first place. So I don't know. I just think it's sad that the bias that we're having in the country, and I really believe that we got to get involved in the government. We got to get involved in law enforcement. I'm always seeing when I'm looking at social media that a lot of the Ku Klux Klan and the other supremacy groups, when they were going underground, they got involved, or they had already been involved heavily in law enforcement. And that there's still a really strong presence in law enforcement. Well, I think that as natives, we have the issue with actually trying to get natives to get involved in government and getting involved in law enforcement. And I don't know, it just makes me frustrated,
Yeah.
So.
Well.
So my actual feed just stopped on me. I'm not sure what happened there. I just didn't have it.
Yeah, I'll probably end mine here pretty quick.
Cool. All right.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us. Should we call it?
We're going to call it good for the night.
Some technical issues and
yeah. So.
All right.
We're gonna start doing live more often, and then we're gonna get some more. We're gonna get some more mics, in case the people. I saw some of my listeners said that they couldn't hear me very well.
Yeah.
But we got a lot of compliments tonight, so we really appreciate that.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Who was actually interested in this, and we'll keep doing live. We'll keep having it on YouTube, and we'll keep going with SoundCloud.
Yeah.
And we'll appreciate everybody for listening tonight.
All right.
So thanks for everyone, and you have a good night.
Good night.